Hi, welcome if this is your first time tuning in, or welcome back if you're a returning viewer or subscriber. I am Nikki, here with another video for you today. Did you apply for permanent residency outside of Canada and got your PR approved and need to travel to the country? Are you a permanent resident outside of Canada and you do not have a valid PR card or your card has been lost or stolen? Here's what you need to do. Let's get into the video. If it is that you have applied from outside of Canada and your PR was approved, congratulations. You do not have to do much. In order to travel into the country after your PR has been approved, you will need to get a PR visa. Based on information from IRCC's website, you do not have to apply for this document. Just as when you applied for your study permit or a visitor visa or any temporary resident permit, you are from a country that you need a TRV to travel to Canada, you would automatically get a TRV issued and you will be able to travel to the country in that regard. As a permanent resident with your permanent residency approved outside of Canada, once you travel into the country and you go through immigration and everything has been successfully cleared after assessments and whatever questions they need to ask to ensure that you are still eligible to become a permanent resident of Canada, you would need to apply for your first PR card. If you, on the other hand, traveled outside of the country and you do not have a valid PR card to return to the country, you have to apply for a permanent residency travel document or a PRTD. To apply for the PRTD, it's a simple process. However, you must be eligible or remain eligible as a permanent resident. So let's get into some details in regards to what the application process is like, what eligibility requirements you need to fulfill, and any necessary documentation, fees, and processing times. So you need to ensure that you meet the permanent residency obligation, which is generally to have been a resident of Canada for at least 730 days. And this is within the last 5 years. What you need to do is to apply for the PRTD. One way to apply for this document, this travel document, is to log in to your PR portal. In the PR portal, you will need to indicate what you want to apply for, indicate that you are outside of Canada, and it will take you to the application form. It will develop the necessary checklist, whatever documents you need to upload, and guide you through the process accordingly. It's a simple process and it does not take a very long time to have that application created. So based on the information on IRCC's website, you need to complete the application form. You will need your passport, proof of your PR status, as well as proof of residency in Canada. You need to ensure that you pay the necessary processing fee. As far as the information that I found, it's 50 Canadian dollars. Submit the completed application form and the necessary supporting documents for processing. You need to ensure that you indicate if the TRD application, the request that you're making, is urgent or not. If it is urgent, then there are necessary documentation that you need to submit to prove the urgency. If you have a medical situation, a death in your family, or whatever the case may be, you need to show that appropriate proof with your application so that it can be prioritized for processing. What is important to note is that a PRTD is a one-time use document. So once you travel back to Canada, you would need to apply to have your PR card replaced. So there are varying processing times, and I would imagine that it may depend on the volume of applications that IRCC has to process and maybe even the country that you applied for your PRTD from. So you need to ensure that you check your application that it is complete, as well as to respond promptly to IRCC for any requests. So if they need additional documents, you ensure that you keep an eye on your application and fulfill any requests for additional documents as quickly as possible to prevent any delays. So there are certain restrictions on who should not apply for a PRTD. That includes a Canadian citizen, a foreign national that does not have a PR status, persons who are permanent residents with a valid PR card, and those who are voluntarily giving up their PR status, as well as past permanent residents who have lost their PR status. So now we will move on to exploring what the PRTD guide is. That's guide number 5529. I will take you briefly through the various sections of the guide so that you have an understanding of what to expect in the process and how to go about filling out the application. We are on IRCC's website on Guide 5529 that's applying for a permanent residence travel document. It indicates Canada's entry rules that a permanent resident must show a valid PR card or a permanent resident travel document when boarding a flight to Canada or utilizing any other commercial carrier to get back into the country. You need to also ensure that your PR card is valid when it is that you're leaving the country and intend to return. If not, this is where the PRTD comes in, and this application can be done online or on paper through a VAC. So the application can be done online at any time, 7 days a week, and you get to upload your documents quickly, and there are no printing required. So the table of contents shows that the overview of the application process before you apply: gathering your documents, filling out the application, paying the fees, submitting the application, what happens next, as well as there is a guide or an appendix A, which is the residency obligation. So this is not a legal document. The information here says that you need a PRTD if it is that you're a permanent resident outside of Canada without a valid PR card. So your PR card might have been lost or stolen, or it might have been expired. And you need to travel back to Canada on a commercial transport, as well as once you get back into the country, you would need to immediately renew or replace your PR card. Who does not need a PRTD? I mentioned this information before. Canadian citizen, someone that does not have a PR status, someone that does have a valid PR card in their possession, a permanent resident who have voluntarily given up or renounced their permanent resident status, and a past permanent resident who lost their PR status. In getting the PRTD, as I mentioned earlier in the video, you need to prove who you are, confirm your permanent resident status, and that you meet the PR obligation, which is having to be a resident of Canada for at least 730 days in the last 5 years. So there's a document checklist that you can access this link and find that information. You would also need to include a copy of this document checklist with your application. So who will need to use the application? And I did mention before, a permanent resident without their valid PR card, having to meet the PR residency obligation, and all these jazz. So you need to include a cover letter that explains your circumstances and the request for multiple entry TRD if it is that you're living outside of Canada on a long-term basis. So in general, a TRPD is a one-time use document, but here it says that you need to apply for a multiple entry one if it is that you're living outside of Canada on a long-term basis. So the first step is getting your supporting documents and the document checklist. As I mentioned before, you need to have this included in your application and uploaded once you're prompted to do so. So you must have a copy of your valid passport as well as copies of all the pages in your passport that have information on there, stamps, and so forth. And you should not be sending your original passport with your application. That's if you're applying on paper. So you need proof showing that you meet the residency obligation in the last 5 years, and the make reference to the residency obligation to ensure that you meet that requirement. And you need to have copy of your receipt showing the amount that was paid, and it's 50 Canadian dollars. Any additional supporting documents, authorization to travel, that's for minors, and other considerations under humanitarian or compassionate grounds. You made it halfway through the video. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you haven't already done so, please remember to subscribe to my channel. Hit the post notification bell so that when I post another video, you will be one of the first persons to be notified. Like this video and share it with someone. Let's get back to the video. You need to fill out the forms, and if it is that you are completing the application online, that's through the PR portal, the application will be there and you just filling the information. So if you're doing the application on paper, it's telling you if you need more space, you need to indicate or include another sheet with the application. So the forms in the document checklist that you need to fill out, and document checklist is IMM 5644. Use of a representative form if you're using a representative, as well as the authorization to release the information to a designated individual. And these are, I assume, the paper-based information. And it's telling you that there are two types of representative: an uncompensated representative as well as a compensated representative. So general application information, and you need to use the checkbox to indicate if you're appointing a representative and if you're canceling a representative. So section A is the applicant information, where you need to write your last name as well as your given name or first name, your date of birth. And in a case where you are canceling a representative or whatever the case may be, you would need in question 3 to indicate the name of the office where your application was submitted and the type of application where you submitted it. And I assume this would be the paper-based application. Question 4, write your IRCC ID, that's your UCI. And section B, you appoint a representative under question 5, or if it indicate that you're using a uncompensated or a compensated representative. Question 6, put your representative contact information. And question 8 is where you accept the responsibility. That's in the case of a representative, and they must sign and date the declaration. Canceling your representative is section C of the application, and section D is your declaration. And there is a need to sign a release of information to other individuals if you're using a representative. So you can go through in details for this bit. And for online applications, if you have not already submitted your application, upload this form along with your online application. If you have already submitted your application, you must use a web form to upload. I would assume, if I'm reading well, it would be the release of representative. Step 3 is to pay your fees, and the permanent resident travel document fee is $50, as I mentioned before. If you're going to pay the fee, I'm not sure if this is in a case. I believe this might be in the case when you're paying the fee online for a paper-based application. I could be wrong. However, they're directing you how to pay your fees, where you are paying the fees from, and you indicate the country, what type of application. It's a permanent residence application, and the program or document that you're applying for would be the permanent resident travel document. And you select get payment instructions, and it will direct you how to pay. You must include a payment receipt with your application. So, this is suggesting that it's when you're applying on paper. So the information I was given before is for the paper based application. And they're telling you that the fee will not be refunded once they started processing your application or if your application was refused. If you're submitting your application, that's step 4. You can do it online using the permanent residence portal. And if you submit the application in on paper, you must find a visa application center, that's a VAC or VAT. Information here says that the application must be in a sealed envelope, and just ensure that you have all the necessary information and documentation. For urgent requests, when I went onto the online application, I just went onto my PR portal to see what the online application for the PRTD would look like. And it was asking where I'm applying from. And just because I know that from Canada, you cannot apply for a PRTD, I indicated that I'm outside of Canada. And the question did come up asking if the request is urgent, you say yes or no, but I indicated no. If you're doing it on paper, you need to write urgent on the envelope and provide the date of travel and include the supporting documents explaining why your request is urgent. So if it's urgent, you must show that you're traveling within the next 5 days for one of the reasons: your own serious illness, the serious illness or death of a family member, lost or stolen PR card while on a temporary travel outside of Canada, if you are in crisis, or in an emergency or a vulnerable situation or any other, and you have the necessary documentation to prove the urgency. You must include all the following documents to show that you need urgent processing. So, that is a letter explaining the reason for the urgency with the date of your travel and proof of your urgency. So, an example would be a doctor's note, another example would be a death certificate. And you must provide the English or French translation of any documents that are not in English or French. So, what do you do next? An officer will decide if you're eligible for the PRTD and make a decision. And this is generally done without an interview, based on your application itself, the information, and the submitted documents. If your application is complete, they will issue the PRTD counterfoil in your passport. So they will send you a request for your passport, and the PRTD is all that you need from the visa office to re-enter Canada. If the application is incomplete, however, they will return it to you. If the application is refused, they will give you a letter explaining why it was refused, as well as indicating your rights to appeal. And if you decide to appeal a negative decision, so you must follow the instructions that they give in the notice of appeal letter. And if your application is withdrawn, you will get a letter explaining the reason for the withdrawal. And Appendix A is the residency obligation. So it's stating here having the need to reside in Canada for 5 years for at least 730 days, and you can read the rest of the information at your leisure. So I logged into my PR portal, just showing you what it looks like and how you upload the necessary documents. So upload proof of your PR document, and you select if it's urgent or not. The application forms, you click start, and the other documents you upload accordingly. Upload required supporting documentation, select the document type, and you attach your documents. Name them correctly. Proof of payment, you do need to put your proof proof of payment here. So pay on IRCC's website and upload a copy of the receipt there. In order to submit your application, you need to do the necessary declaration. So upload that or fill out that declaration form and indicate the completed mandatory forms, include proof of payment, and that the completed consent and so forth. Thank you so much for making it through Nikki's Lens, and I'll see you in my next video.